Hello to everybody that's tuning in tonight for tonight's episode with the Coach's Corner. Hello, gentlemen. How are you doing?
Good evening,
Pretty good.
young lady. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Just a few housekeeping tips. If you are tuning in and watching, by all means, feel free to ask questions. Just drop them in the chat box. I'll be keeping an eye on it and pass it off to our lovely presenters this evening. Try to keep it on topic if at all possible. If we cannot get to it, it is not personal. We will try to make sure that they are answered in the future. All right, and with that being said, I'm going to pass this off to Viscount Tristan to get us started tonight.
Lovely. I was really excited about this episode, and if you're not clear exactly because of the title of what we're talking about the fundamentals of combat, and that is the 5 different elements that Viscount Sagan has broken down to teach young fighters how to troubleshoot their technique and how to improve. And from a coaching or teaching standpoint, you can kind of take one of two approaches. One, you can try to just brain dump everything that you know. If you see this, then do that. And that tends to confuse fighters. But if you really understand the principles, the basic fundamental principles of combat, you can train fighters to troubleshoot their own techniques and to find out why what they're doing isn't working. You can try to replicate success by boiling these things down to their fundamental principles. And so without further ado, I want to pass this to Viscount Sagan to elaborate on his fundamental principles and how he's made these things easier for people, especially newer people, to attach to what should they be doing to find success. And if they fail, how to identify that failure.
Right. Well, good evening. Thank you, Your Excellency. What we're going to go over tonight is to those who have been in armor and have fought, or even those who are just starting out, it's not a real surprise. However, one of the things I ran into when I first decided that my niche in the SCA was to be a trainer was that even belted fighters needed assistance in a lot of these areas. And it was one of those things where, how do I make this as common as possible? How do I make this as easily understood as possible? And then how do I make it trainable? And that I've done over the years. Again, there's no one way to train. Other people are probably doing similar things, guaranteed. What I did was based on the school I was teaching, and you will obviously recognize certain things in this that you've recognized in other training. So without further ado, we've talked before that along this line, as a fighter is where you are. You started as an absolute beginner, and somewhere in here is where you want to get to. On this end of the scale is the top 2% of fighters in the SCA. The difference is how well they train and practice and then do combat. So in order to get there, we need to understand the fundamentals. Now, fundamentals are very simple: range, recognition, and then I could say decision, but I put selection and then delivery and recovery. Now, in that, it sounds somewhat, that's really simple. I know about range. Okay, I recognition, well, I think I know what he's talking about. Selection, well, maybe. Delivery and recovery, I know all about that. I do that every week when I train and when I practice. So all of those happen in a fight in the same moment on two sides. Your Grace, if you would. So we have offense and defense, 5 on each side. Range is common on both. Offense, obviously, it's with the weapon you are using. Defense, range is against the weapon being used by your opponent. Offense is target recognition. On defense, I'd basically call this one recognition because, as you can see in this third box on the right-hand side, it could be a blow, it could be a fake, it could be misdirection. So there has to be recognition in order to move on to the next. In offense, it's blow selection. Okay, I see the target. Now, what do I want to do to take care of that target? Or even simpler is it a wound or is it a killing target? In defense, there's a defense selection. And again, in that third box on the right-hand side, the defense selection is I'm going to block it, I'm going to evade it, or I'm going to accept it. And then the last two, I guarantee you from my experience, are the ones that I have found that are extremely common to the first one, and they invariably turn out to be the least trained and practiced. And they need to be practiced as a pair. So as we see on an offense, range, yours and your opponent's. Defense, same thing. Well, let's discuss that for a second, right? If you're both the same height and your swords are the same length and you have the same shield style, okay, then you're pretty evenly matched up. But if you're 5'6" and your opponent's 6'7", things change, because it would become obvious at that point that you're going to be in their range well before they are in yours. So, but in order to contest with the individual, you have to take that into consideration. Target recognition on the offensive side is highest percentile target you feel you can accomplish a blow against, and if possible, a kill over a wound. Now remember, we've talked about this before too. All the information is coming in through your ocularium, right? On both sides, what you intend to do and what your opponent may do. I say may do because I don't like preconceived ideas. In the training that I do, I train people to be reactionary, but it's reactionary based on a calm center. And it's also reactionary based on how well they've trained and practiced. Now then, the bottom box says, all of these are in play at the same moment during a fight, not one then the other. A contest is not your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn. It's a dance that will ultimately end. Maybe it ends in a double kill, but most commonly, obviously, one opponent wins and the other loses. The good news about everything you're seeing on that screen, again, if you're a fighter, you're doing this all the time. There's no magic here. There's no silver bullet. But one of the things that we can offer is the fact that in each of these columns, all of these are trainable. And that means if I can do it as a trainer, then I can get my trainee to do it at practice. Because as we get closer and closer to combat, and I'll describe some of the drills that take you there, it becomes obvious and proven that you can do this. Upper belted fighters, top 2%ers, they're already doing it. They don't think about this, right? Beginners, lower unbelteds, right? Novice fighters. A lot of times they're what I call an action-based fighter. They're thinking about it. Okay, how close am I? Okay, what target's open? Oh, is it really open? Okay, now, oh, darn it, they moved. Okay, so now I have to go through that scenario again. I guarantee you that a top 2%er, all they're doing is they're taking the information in, and they are so well trained and practiced that when it's time, a reaction will kick off and a blow will come out, and it won't matter what you're doing. If you're throwing at them, that's fine too. A lot of times that's preferable because then you're busy doing something while they're doing something. The key takeaway is that you know for a fact that these are the basics on both sides of what you do. Now, it's really easy when you're trying to say, oh, offense, I have a sword in one hand. Defense, okay, I have a shield in the other. But that's not what this is all about. It doesn't matter what weapon or shield form or weapons form, if it's two-sword, if it's axe and mace, if it's a madu and an axe, if it's, you've got a polearm, okay. You've got a greatsword, okay. You still have to do all these things. It's how well you take the first two in that you'll be given the opportunity to do the last three. So if they're all trainable and they can all be practiced, then you know for a fact that based on the object lesson that you're doing it already, what the attention needs to be on is each one. So drill for range. That's fairly simple. You know, I make sure you're in range with whatever weapon you've got, and I inform you as the trainee that you are to stay in range no matter what I do, and we're going to go very slow. Okay, and when I say stop, you will stop, and I'll say proof, and you will prove to me that you are in range for the blow on the targets that you see. Not that you're just in range. We're going to walk through what blows are you in range for and what defense are you in range to perform. Blow selection. Well, that really gets down to the nitty gritty, doesn't it? Because in the first one, you know, you got to do the range, then the target is obvious to you. Okay. It's like, but for me, it's like, show me two things. Show me that you see the target and show me what blow you're going to select. And then we'll walk through, is it a high percentile? And is it a kill over a wound? The other side is, how easily is it for you to recognize that my defense would or would not be able to handle the blow you've just described? Once again, you're already doing this training and practice already and in combat. Now we're breaking it down to give you the opportunity to go through it and for the trainee to point out, yes, that's true, but what about this blow instead? Harder for me to block. It's a wound rather than a kill, but you gain advantage over the wound. Then the last two, right? Delivery and recovery. Wow. We all know that I have to hit that person with a stick. And then I want the stick back. I need to block their shot. Now, how well the last one on defense is done really, really depends on a lot of things. But it is still true that when you deliver the defense, you need to recover from it. So when we're talking these things and we're talking about a drill, so the range drill is fairly simple, right? But then we get into the fact that you have to do two things, and I, as the trainer, want you to do them at the exact same moment. So I am going to give you the opportunity to be both offensive and defensive at the same moment, albeit very slow at first without any armor. So now you know we're not fighting. There is no competition here, right? So the two drills that we use for this are very simple, and you've probably done them already. It's block as you strike, which means I, as a trainer, am going to allow you to start a blow before I start mine. And I expect you to do two things. I want you to complete your shot, even if I block it, and I want you to block my shot. So you get to use, and again, it could be a greatsword. So you still need to understand how is that going to work, right? Because in some instances with single weapons, you're going to have to come off of your shot the block, unless you've got, and you're suddenly doing both. The other one is the other way around, right? And I get to go first. So you got block as you strike and strike as you block, right? So in the second one, strike as you block, I'm going first. And so it does take a little bit of reference in that, because one of the basic things is, leg shots, head shots on side. But what happens when my first blow cuts across and it's headed towards your offside helm, right? When we're doing it slow, it gives you more what's termed reaction timing. You get to do the recognition and you get to go, okay, this is what's going, I need to select the defense and I need to select an offense. In drill form, it gives you plenty of time. And again, we're trying to become that reactionary type fighter where the information came into my eyes and yet I still had to process it, but I didn't have to sit there and think, okay, I have to move the stick, I have to move the board, okay, I have to block and I have to strike. Okay, and again, in training, it's geared to make sure the trainee is successful. Then we get down to delivery and recovery. These are the two where even in those two basic drills, I, as the trainer, will be watching. Can you deliver the shot and the defense at the same time with a reasonable amount of success potential? That's what I'm after. I'm not saying you have to, right out of the box, you're gonna be able to do this, because you're not. It's one of those things where when we take it down to training, it's meant to be dissected, taken apart, and put back together for the trainee to gain the understanding, not for the trainer. The trainer knows, right? The trainer knows, and the trainee is to perform as instructed. So in the very, very basics, this is what it's all about. Now that we could, and we coaches talked about it a little bit beforehand, we could look at this and go, so I'm a baseball player and I'm standing at the plate and the pitcher's about to throw the ball to me. And when the ball starts coming, I have to determine the range. I have to determine where's that ball going. And then I have to determine, what do I want to do with it? Do I want to place hit it to left field? Do I want to try and put it out of the park? Then with the bat, I have to deliver and I recover and I'm off and running. So in all sports, especially in martial arts, these 5 things on each side and in combination with one another are those things that as a trainee, the better you master them, you should find that your training and your practice is better. And when you go to use them in combat, you will perform at the level you are at the moment. Again, going back to the old, if you lose, don't lose the lesson. Well, you bring the lesson home and then you work on it together with your trainer. You hone it even further. You go through the drills. The drills speed up over time, right? Closer and closer to combat. So, Your Grace, what do you think? You're muted. There you go.
Yeah. So this is something that I clearly got from Sagan many years ago, and has become a core of my training process. When I do my fighting clinic, this is part 2 of the lecture that I start with. And one of the things, a couple of things to note about this is, I've kind of refer to them as universal principles of combat, because they are absolutely universal. And as he used the example of a baseball player, right? It's the same kind of stuff. I mean, how far away is the pitcher from the plate? How fast is that ball coming in? Is it a curveball? Is it a fastball? It's just these concepts. We tend to focus on sword and shield as kind of, sword and shield is sort of the default of our sport. And so we typically teach from that perspective, but it's important to understand that these are not sword and shield concepts. These are not heavy weapons concepts. These are equally applicable to rapier fighters, archery, siege weapons. These are not even just SCA combat principles. These are universal. Range is range. Target recognition, blow recognition. And then making a decision and then executing those decisions. And one of the things about teaching this to, especially to higher end fighters, is it's important to understand that there's nothing in what we're talking about that is fundamentally going to change your style, right? This is not about changes to style. This is identifying parts of your existing style, right? You're not changing anything about it. You're just getting a better understanding of what it is that you're doing. And when we talk to the higher end fighters about this stuff, a lot of times these are absolutely things that they are doing. They just don't know that they're doing them. I was telling Tristan earlier in the week that I taught a class down in Glen Aubin, and Duke Felix from the mid realm, who's currently king of the mid realm, was at class. And when I got done with this part of the lecture, he was all excited because now he had words for, the stuff that he already knew. He just couldn't convey that information. He knew that he was doing these things. He just couldn't get it across to other people in terms that they would understand. And so really all I did with it, I didn't change his fight in any way. I just gave him a better understanding of what it is that he's doing. And when Sagan talks about how these things are all happening simultaneously, the analogy that I use for that is that you think about it like pistons firing in an engine, right? If you're running an engine at 3,000 RPM driving down the road, it's just humming along like a well-oiled machine. You don't hear individual pistons firing. But if we can take that engine and we can slow everything down so that we can slow it down to the rate where we are seeing individual pistons firing, and we can just analyze the fight as click 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 click, range, shot selection, or target recognition, blow recognition, looking at all these things, we can break down the fight to one or multiple of these components, and we can specifically target those components, and we can train each one of those individual things so you get better at each of the individual components, and you'll get better at, you'll do a drill for blow recognition, you'll do a drill for recovery, you'll do a separate drill for delivery, which is mostly bell work, right? But we can break down these individual things, and these 5 things cover the entire fight. If you focus on these things, you train them individually like this, it just makes it easier for us to target those things. And this is where I want to pitch over to Tristan. As somebody who owns an Aikido dojo, you kind of, as a trainer in that environment as well, you probably see this all the time.
Yeah, in fact, this is one of those things where what you guys are talking about, I would qualify as the extreme abstract ideal of those principles. Now, a good coach, a good trainer can watch combatants and start to see, all right, they're really good at range. There's a little bit of an issue with shot recognition. The delivery is good, but maybe recovery is kind of poor. They kind of start to look and study and see, and you can do this when you're watching either yourself on video or watch other people on video. If you want to build your literacy as a coach, start watching fights with this template in mind. Try to classify and see whether somebody, where their strengths are in terms of these principles and where their weaknesses are. Then you can look at video of yourself and start to study yourself with that same lens. That's harder because you're personally invested in your own performance. And whether or not you're watching video of yourself or you do your fight and you step back and you said, what just happened there? What principles did I do well? And what principles did I falter with? Or what did I struggle with? And this is where being able to self-audit is a skill that you build like a muscle. You have to exercise it repeatedly over time, again and again and again, to be totally honest with yourself. You don't want to either completely slam your own performance, nor do you want to ride your own ego and say, I've just done awesome, just judging on how many people you've hit and how little you've gotten hit. Instead, when you can really study yourself and say, which of these principles did I do well and which did I falter at? That's when you can start troubleshooting your own technique. You can help other people troubleshoot their technique. And it gets quite granular. The more you do it, the more you will see. Your vision will increase and expand. And you can see within even a few seconds when somebody doesn't have speed of decision making. They don't recognize the blows that are coming in. They're clueless as to their range. And that makes a great coach. When you can spot that, then you can say, all right, we know exactly your problem. Let's get a drill that's going to help you overcome that. And this is one of those things where I think when people get into coaching and training, they want to collect drills, kind of like they want to collect techniques. Mm-hmm. Like I want to know every shot. I want to know the crazy, cue shots and all that stuff. They collect these things. A good coach comes up with a drill for a specific student. he comes up with something that will address that one weakness that they're having, that they're continuously struggling with, that they need help with. And really, I've found as an instructor, yeah, I've used some of the drills and some of the techniques that my instructor taught, but I've come up with way more on my own, just to cover what is the specific deficit we are dealing with right here. Let's isolate this, train it for a bit, and then we take it in that same practice. Let's integrate this into the rest of your overall fight. Don't just treat it like a totally isolated thing. Yes, you're going to isolate it for a while, but then you want to blend it into sparring, into the normal work. And it's not just, all right, we're going to isolate this and then it's going to go 100% sparring intensity. It's going to go, let's drill this. Let's now put it into a somewhat free-form style where you can actually work on those aspects. Then we're going to increase the intensity. When that's comfortable, now we're going to increase the intensity. When that starts getting comfortable, now we're going to go full sparring, and now you're going to integrate it. So there's like a ramp up procedure for identifying the deficit and then integrating it into the regular fight.
Right. Yes. Well said. Well said. And one of the other things we have to recognize here, whichever trainer you're working with, they may, like I've come up with a way that when I'm working with my trainees, I provided this way of looking at things, but by doing so, it gave us a common language. It gave us a common framework, point of reference, and understanding when we're communicating with one another. Now, this is one of those things that the diagram you just saw, while I was doing these drills a long, long time ago, I didn't document like I have in that one diagram for quite some time. I recognized them. I sat down and I was asking myself the question, so what is it? How do I distill this? How do I get it down to, again, a common point of reference that I can actually then train people and move that into practice, and then they can see the results in combat. Some of my earlier trainees that may watch this, they're like, well, I know what the drill, I know what he did. I know what the drills were, but this diagram, I don't know, I never phrased it that way. So it is one of those things that it's a tool. We're discussing tonight, because of limited time, the basics of that tool. Again, common framework, common language, and it can be used between, if you're talking to me specifically, or as great as Sean, or some of my prior trainees, they'll know exactly what you're talking about. But other people, they'll, when they see it, they might go, oh, I get it. So the one thing, again, that you've heard me say before is get the information out there and hopefully it's useful. That's what we're doing with this tonight. And Sean, what would you say? So when we first met 25 years ago, right? Yeah. When I was
a quarter century
6 and you were 7.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I first started working with you on this, what was your first thoughts of how, why, where, when does this thing work?
Well, I know one of the earliest memories I have of this material is it wasn't intuitive, but when you explained it, it made sense, right? It didn't take a lot of explanation to understand what these concepts were, because again, I was to varying degrees, I was doing these things. But one of the big things about it early on was that I intentionally did not teach it to my students because I wanted to have a better understanding of what it was before I give them a watered down version of it. I suppose it wasn't too terribly long after, but there was a period where I was like, it's like, okay, I understand this from, having been a knight for as close to 10 years at that point. But it's like, I don't want to give somebody else bad information based on a rudimentary understanding of this. But it was, and my experience has been since I've given this to a lot of other people over the years, it's when you are introduced to these concepts, it's, well, yeah, like duh, like of course all these things, there's all these things in place. But for me, it wasn't intuitive necessarily. And everywhere I go and I tell people these things, it really is it's that, oh, why didn't I see that? How could I not have noticed these things before? So there was that. And one of the things to understand too about all these concepts is, you've got these 5 things that are happening on both sides of the fight. So essentially you have 10 things that are happening, right? We did 2 episodes about speed in our sport, right? Um, Speed is a small component of delivery, right? And if somebody is just faster than you are, you don't have to get faster than them. That's not necessarily the answer. If speed is a component of one factor of this, there are 9 other things that you can make marginal improvements on that will more than compensate for what you're missing in just this one small portion of just delivery. So as we train these other things, you can train any of these things to become a strength of your fight. That doesn't have to be, I just need to throw faster. So that's one side of it.
Okay. So Tristan, I'm curious. So Sharmak Sensei, from the point of view of Aikidoka, how long had you been on the mat before this came into your perception to where you could use it?
That's an interesting question. And by the time I started Aikido, I had almost 25 years worth of SCA combat in addition to other martial art experience. So really, I brought a lot of that flavor into my Aikido training. Mm-hmm. Not because I wanted to impose and say I know a bunch of stuff already, but as I emptied off my slate and just said, all right, we're starting completely new. As I started studying, I realized there's a lot of concepts here that have the crossover. And this is where I guess this particular episode appealed to me the most, which is the principles of hoplology, which is the study of human combative behavior. Mm-hmm. The more you see principles echoed in other sports and other fighting and other combat, the more you see a universality of that principle, the more strongly it applies to that art. And granted, there are some things like, you look at the range of fencing, for example, when all the weapons are the same length and there's a linear line. Some of the concepts have been sort of removed because nobody's flanking. You can't hit somebody from behind. You can't block with an offhand weapon, but you still see those fundamentals, certain fundamentals that are brought out in that sport. And then you look at things like sumo, wrestling, you name it, any combative behavior at all. And you see principles that cross from one to the other. These fascinated me, and they held with when I started into pugilism and boxing and wrestling and kicking arts, all kinds of different things. They all come down to the same 5 principles that you listed, and I would give you great credit because you boiled them down to a truly a absolute fundamental abstract level. So much so that it can be hard for somebody who's not heavily experienced to see, well, what do you mean by the intricacies of range or the intricacies of blow selection? Those things can take a while to absorb, and I appreciate that because I felt the very same thing when I read Book of Five Rings. When you first read that, it just goes right over your head. Like, what on earth is this guy talking about? But it takes a while to absorb and really understand the applicability of those things. And one of the things I was very much into in my younger years was the study of warfare in general. And there was an ace in one of the first German aces of World War II. His name was Oswald Boelcke, and he came up with Dicta Boelcke, which was his challenge. He was a talented World War I fighter pilot. He had a number of successes. He was one of the first aces of the war. His job was to train young pilots in how to survive air combat and be successful in air combat. His method was exactly like Sagan's, and he came up with a list of 8 rules that says if you do these things, you will probably survive and win in air combat. They weren't complicated. They are, in fact, a number of them are even used today in training fighter pilots in how to survive air combat, because he identified certain fundamentals of combat, even though they were in aircraft versus on the ground. Like Sean said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're in an aircraft, you're carrying a frying pan or a rifle or a bayonet or a spear or firing an artillery piece. These fundamentals apply. And so that's why I've evolved into and I was always like this in the SCA. I very quickly acknowledge, like, when you win, it's because you've adhered to good principles. When you lose, you screwed up and you messed one up. You tried to push it, or a couple, and you got caught. And this is where I think any top fighter will realize it doesn't matter whether I won or lost. If I violated one of those principles, I got lucky. And they'll be upset and say, I screwed up. Well, and normal people will say, well, but you won. That must be great because you won. And say, no, I shouldn't have. I made a big mistake. I violated one of those principles, and I'm just lucky I didn't get caught doing it. So I guess that's kind of my perspective. I guess it's a little bit of a long-winded answer, but
No, not at all.
That kind of goes along with something I'd said in a previous episode about, when you ask that question, did you win that fight or did your opponent lose that fight? Right. And that's exactly what you're talking about. It's like, when I do these things right, well, it's more fair to say when I am successful, it is because I am doing these things correctly. Sometimes when I'm doing these things correctly, that doesn't mean I'm going to be successful. But when I am successful, it is because I'm doing these things correctly. And
Right.
when I have failed, it is because I have violated one of these principles. And like you said, there are times when you violate one of these principles and you get away with it.
Right.
And that's certainly not, it may be victory, but it's not mastery. That kind of, there's the movie Free Solo about Alex Honnold, a rock climber who climbed El Capitan in Yosemite Park without any ropes. And he had said that before he had done that, he climbed Half Dome in Yosemite. And there was a moment in there where, he took a risk and just decided to take a step. And after he got done climbing Half Dome, he realized that he got away with something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same kind of thing. It's like that's not mastery. It's not overcoming the mountain. It's you got away with something. And we see that a lot. And yeah, when I violate these principles, I'm going to lose mostly, or I should lose, right? And when I do video analysis, when I do my fighting clinic, I'll do the video analysis, and it is important for me to show on the video, the moments where I get killed, because I come, me, Sagan, Branos, we come into a place and people think that we have all the answers, and that we that we don't lose any fights because we have all the answers. So it's important for me to look at the video, see the fights where I lost, and to be able to demonstrate to somebody in that video. It's like, okay, I got killed. Why did I get killed? Why does a top 2% fighter get killed at a practice where I'm the instructor, where I'm the trainer, right? And I have to break that down. I have to show them it's like, this is me not doing what I tell you to do. It's not do as I say, do as I say, not as I do. It's not that at all. It's like sometimes we don't. And a lot of times the reason we don't is because we don't have to. And when you kind of don't have to, you get lazy and complacent, and then you get caught. And when I get caught, yeah, I'll back that video up and I'll show it over and over and over again. It's like, this is me not doing the very basic things that I'm telling you to do.
Right.
It's easy for and my instructor put this very, very well. And he said, because something is simple doesn't mean it's easy. And it's easy to convey All right, think of how simple the concept of range is, but how hard is it to be a master of range? Those are two very different things. And what you're talking about, I've also related to your basic strategy as well. It's easy to think I have to go and press the fight, take the initiative, keep the momentum going, and I have to press hard. Well, and then I relate to this was some insights that a friend of mine who was a tennis instructor would explain. He said, my job isn't to outwit you on a tennis court and put that ball in every corner so you're scrambling around like crazy, and to fight to make sure that I just pound that ball at you so hard that you just can't keep up. What I really need to do is just keep that ball going across the net and let you screw up. I'm going to just be here waiting, and I'm going to keep the ball coming back at you so that you can try hard and you can make the failure. And this was something that affected me as a knight. That I don't, because I only learned this about, I don't know, 8 or 10 years after I was knighted. And it really opened up a whole new perspective of my fighting, to say, I'm not out here to prove how good of a swordsman I am. I'm just going to be alive when you make a mistake, and I'm going to be ready, and I'll be there waiting, and I'm going to be patient, and I'm going to watch, and I will be the one standing, because I've got a good enough defense to be here still alive when you finally make that mistake. And if I can keep and here's the fundamentals that I would always talk about: fundamentals of stance, fundamentals of range, so that I'm in range so that I can capitalize when you make that mistake. My balance is good enough that I can move and execute when that moment comes. My hands and my guard position are ready at a point where my defense is tight and solid, and I can execute, and I can recover, and I can be ready to exploit the opportunity that just happened from that motion. Because if I get advantage on one motion, I'm going to follow it up with second, third, fourth, fifth, and it's going to be like an avalanche rolling down a hill on you. You make one mistake, and that's going to be it. So this can play into your strategy, because I know, as you know, as a young fighter, I thought, man, I need to come out of the gate, like a stallion doing the quarter mile. I've got to be the first one to that quarter mile post, and I just go guns on crazy. When I got taken down, it was by somebody who was using patience, who was waiting for the mistake. They were ready. They were calm. They let me just unleash all my fury on them, and it didn't work, because they had everything covered. They were calm and patient, and then just bang, right in the middle, they saw their opportunity, and it was over. And I always admire them, because I was huffing and puffing from having thrown like 3,800 shots, and they threw one, and that was it. And so in doing that, I saw and learned, oh, okay, there's a different approach, not just overwhelm your opponent. Fight smarter, not harder. And fighting smarter means you adhere to those principles.
There you go. There you go. And one of the things that, again, the diagram is a beginning. It's obviously not a do-all, be-all, end-all. There's so many different facets of a fight that we could go through based on each one of them, and all of them in combination that we don't have time to do here. However, we're available to discuss them with you. If you'd like to send an email, send a post to the Coach's Corner. However you would like to do it. The object here again is to get the information out. Clarification can be provided again via email, a phone call. Maybe we do a Zoom with a group of people. So again, tonight was your introduction to the way I documented these 5 things on each side. And I would like to thank His Grace and His Excellency for helping in this. They come from a similar background in the SCA. Sharmak Sensei comes from a different background in Aikido. So again, I hope I have provided you with a tool that you can use to a certain degree. And I am obviously willing, capable, and able to assist you however you would like me to. Your Grace.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the things that you impressed early on to me about these principles is the 2 most neglected portions of that, being delivery and recovery. I have I have taken as my absolute soapbox principle recovery, especially offensive recovery, to me is the single most neglected portion of the fight. It is the one thing that people fail to do most often. It's why you hear me talk so much about fixing recovery. It's why I ended up making the 2-second drill, which is the most effective drill that I teach. And it turns out that if you fix your recovery, you coincidentally fix a lot of other problems in the fight related to these things. When you have better recovery, that puts your stick in a better position to have better delivery. That also gives you the time you need to make better target recognition and make better choices about the blows that you're throwing. And we've talked about that before on the coach's corner about the why, right? The decision making process, and it, having an understanding of what each of these individual pieces are leads you to that decision making process. Because then you start asking those questions: am I in range to get to this? What have they provided me? What is the easiest shot for me to get to? Those sort of things. And you can use all of these things, offensively and defensively, all 5 of these things, to in part of that decision making process. And when you make better decisions about the blows that you're throwing, fighting just gets a whole lot easier. It gets to be a lot less work. And and that's one of the things I love hearing from students is well, it's a lot easier than what I've been doing. Right. So let's do the thing that is less work. Let's do the thing that is easier in the fight and for our bodies. And Tristan was kind of alluding to letting I don't have to make you, I don't have to beat you. I tell newer fighters all the time, you have to beat me. I don't have to beat you, because I have the experience and the patience where I can sit and weather the storm, and eventually you are going to make a mistake. And when you make that mistake, I'm going to be in a position to capitalize on the mistake. So you have to beat me. I don't have to beat you, because you're going to provide me an opportunity to do that. And all of these things, when you break these things down, and you can pick them all apart, and you can create drills to fix each of these things. So, Tristan, any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll just add one more on here, and that is, I guess, kind of the purpose of this forum, the Coach's Corner, and that is the way that these principles are used is to help coaches want to help other people. I know almost every fighter that I've met in the SCA, almost bar none, has wanted to find out, how do I help other fighters, whether they're in my household, they're in my home group, they're brand new, I want to help them learn to be better. I think these principles are sort of a beacon light that you can use to figure out how exactly to help new fighters.
Yep.
Big thing is, don't try to make them drink from a fire hose. Don't flood them with the whole ball of wax. Pick one thing, the biggest thing that you can see, the biggest deficit that they can benefit from. Give them that one thing, and it will probably be one of those from the list. And just think, I'm just going to give you this one thing to work on, because if anybody remembers back when they started fighting, there was so much to it. It was so easy to get flooded. Your brain would just get overloaded. You'd be flooded with different advice. Everybody was telling you, do this, do that, do your, change your feet, change your armor, change how you swing your sword, change your sword length, change your helmet. It's easy to be overcome. When a good coach will come back to these principles, and will also give a student just enough, a big enough portion that they can consume and eat and process and then apply. If your student is not able to apply these things, you're flooding them.
Yep.
So as a trainer, as a coach, use these things, but don't shove the whole smorgasbord down their throat in one moment. And so this is why I like this subject, because it gives people who want to get into training, and I've heard of many people like would ask Sean or Bronis, people that go around to do training, like, how do I train people? Well, firstly, you need to learn how to do it. You need to practice doing it, And this is the fuel that you can use. These principles are the fuel that you can use to start analyzing, troubleshooting, and helping fighters improve on their game. And I will also say, for those people that think, well, but I'm not a great fighter, why would why would anybody listen to me? You can be a great coach without being a Duke, without being in the top 2%. You can help somebody be a better fighter. In fact, there are many coaches who their fighters, that the people they train become far greater than they ever were. So don't think that because you're not a great fighter already that you can't help somebody else become better. If you learn these principles, you learn how to troubleshoot, how to apply them, how to spot them, you'll become a good coach. And just because you may not be the best competitor out there doesn't mean that you couldn't help a lot of people become better. So never never limit yourself and how you can help somebody else or help other people just because you think, well, I'm not great enough. I haven't won crown 3 or 4 times or 5 times, or, I'm not on caliber with the top knights of the kingdom. Don't let that stop you from helping other people.
Great.
Yeah, we all have to train within our means. And a lot of times that means that you go out there and you see something that needs to be fixed and you can't, it's one of those things that is obvious enough to you that you can't help yourself, but to help somebody fix it. And that's how it starts. You do the best you can to help somebody along.
Yep.
So yeah, I think we'll wrap up for tonight.
Yeah, it appears we don't have any questions. Did we have any come in at the very end there?
No, not really.
I think everybody's quiet and listening this time around.
You're all out, Tristan. Who are you trying to fool?
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, next week we have an interview with Duke Craven coming up. I believe that's what's on our schedule.
Yeah.
So stand by for that. Last week we did the Elephant in the Room episode. If you have any interesting topics you'd like us to take on Elephant in the Room, we're certainly open to suggestions, whether you want to contact us privately or put it up on the Coach's Corner page. We've got a couple of ideas for topics that are coming up, but we're getting to that point. We've got a number of episodes of things we want to cover, but we'd like to hear from you too. So if you have ideas of topics you'd like us to discuss, or any points of interest that you'd like us to cover, feel free to toss up and on the Coach's Corner questions you have, videos. We want to help. We love this more than anything, and as much as we love to get together and chat with each other, there's no greater pleasure than helping somebody get past an obstacle that they're facing, or put to bed a frustration that they're having with their own advancement. I know we're in a kind of a tough time right now. A lot of people can't practice, but listening to conversations like these and opening your mind to a new perspective and new way of looking at things will be the greatest growth that you ever achieve. You will achieve these victories not just through throwing more stick, but for thinking about how you can be better. And that's why we want to plant these ideas in your mind, and to get you thinking about ways of taking on your own fighting and also helping other people train. That's going to be the biggest investment. It's one thing to invest in yourself. It's another thing to invest in the people around you. Mm-hmm. It may not seem obvious, but the better you help make other people around you, the better you will become. You will get back more than you put into them. And this is what I found as an instructor. Teaching will teach you. And sometimes it stings a little bit, because I know I've felt the exact same thing Sean had. I don't want to teach somebody something that's wrong, but I'll tell you right now, you will. Everybody will. You will make a mistake. You'll teach somebody something that's just in a month, a year, 5 years, you're going to find out what I showed them was just crap. And I've found out better. But don't just sit quietly and wait until you are a master to go and teach people, because that process will teach you, helping them. And they'll ask you questions. It's like a 5-year-old. They'll ask you questions that you're like, well, who would ever even ask this? But when you think about how do I answer it, it will make you better. So that whole process is a joyful thing to go through, and much better even than just improving yourself.
Yeah, I get asked as Tristan alluded to, I get asked frequently, this training gig seems to be a lot of fun, a pretty good deal. How do you get into that training thing? And my answer to that has always been that you don't get into this, you end up in it. And it comes from you do your best to help somebody with the thing, and that works for somebody, and then they tell two people and they tell two people, and next thing you know, he's like, well, why don't you ask, Sean helped me with this thing and Sean fixed this thing for me. So why don't you ask him? And next thing you know, you're fixing these things for other people. And it just, you end up in it. It is in my estimation that it's the best job in the world. It really is the best job in the world. I've mentioned several times on this show that I've had plenty of success for myself, and being able to help people find that same level of success for themselves is absolutely intoxicating for me. It's what keeps me going. It's what I live for at this point, is being able to help people have that same feeling of success that I've been fortunate with, and I know Sagan knows exactly what I'm talking about, because he kind of gave that to me, and now I get to give it to others.
Exactly. And that's one of the things over the years, that there is nothing that drives a trainer like success of a trainer. There's nothing better. And if they're not gaining that success, you try and you keep trying, because for a fact there's no one way to train everybody. You have to find a way to communicate with that one trainee, and you put them through the training and practice for them that's successful, in order for one day that you look in their eyes, or they come to you and say, I get it. I can do this now. There's no better feeling. And it's great. Sean is right. Best job in the world.
Yeah. And these principles, these 5 things on each side, this is absolutely how I target my training process. Every time I talk to a student about what needs to be fixed, it always comes back to these things. So that's why I personally had asked Sagan to kind of cover these things, because it is so much a part of my training process, definitely wanted to have that out there. And before we go, I just want to also say that we are all very honored and delighted to have everybody tuning in every Friday night to watch us talk stick. So Coach's Corner was kind of put together as an idea of what would it be like to be a fly on the wall in a conversation of guys like us that talk stick all the time like this at a really high level. And so we really appreciate everybody tuning in. We're very happy to be providing some really good content for the SEA, especially in times when we're shut down. And I just wanted to give a shout out to a number of other content providers along the same lines that are really doing some great stuff. Friday nights following the Coach's Corner, we also have Between Two Peers with Duchess Sir Helga and Mistress Tulia out in the West Kingdom. Tonight they have Dobrushka, who is also known as Maggie the Potter. They're on the show tonight. There is, of course, language ratings for that one, language warnings. But Between Two Pairs is a great show. I also recommend the Ducal interviews that is being done by Sir Rifkin. And there's several others that are out there, and we'll mention those occasionally. Some of the other ones that are out there at the end of the show. That definitely look forward to. Yeah, go watch that stuff. Vesper, what do you got anything lined up coming up soon? I know you've done several of these too.
I have a project in mind that I have not yet revealed. So I'm towing the line on it.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exciting. I'm excited about it. I'll probably announce it in the next week or so.
All right.
And as usual, we'd like to thank Vesper for hosting this and setting up the episode and doing the arrangements and everything. She does the graphics for the cover photos for all the events, so does a great job. Thank you again, Vesper. Really appreciate it.
Yes.
Always so thanks.
Thanks. Yep.
Yes, thank you all for being here tonight, and I'm super excited to see everybody next week on the next episode of the Coach's Corner.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Bye.
Have a good night.
You too.